Miller's Roadhouse sat on the edge of Highway 8, the kind of place where truckers stopped for cheap burgers, cold beer, and a moment of silence between life's storms. It was Saturday noon, the sunlight pouring through dusty windows, and everything inside moved at the slow, comfortable rhythm of small-town Arizona. Caleb Hawk Rourke sat alone at the far end of the bar, shoulders relaxed for the first time in weeks, at 48, with a graying beard and a posture that carried both strength and sorrow. Caleb looked like a man who had lived a lifetime, and then some. Nobody here knew his full story. They knew he used to ride with the Thunder Riders. They knew he'd served 2 tours as a Marine. They knew he'd lost some things he still didn't talk about. But today, he was doing nothing more than eating a plate of fries and enjoying the rare quiet. The jukebox hummed low in the background. A few regulars grumbled over politics. Someone laughed too loudly at the end of the bar. The world felt strangely still, and then the door blew open so violently that the wind snatched the laughter right out of the room. A boy no older than 9 stumbled inside. He was barefoot. His shirt was torn straight through the shoulder. Dust clung to his hair. His face was smeared with tears, mud, and fear so raw it made even the toughest men in the room straighten up. He gasped like he'd been running for miles. Then he screamed, "Please, somebody help my mom." The room froze. Forks hovered in midair. Beer mugs stopped halfway to lips. Conversations died mid-sentence. The jukebox seemed to choke on its own music. Nobody moved. Not a soul. The boy spun, searching every face in the room. Searching for someone, anyone who looked like they might save a life today. But the men closest to him looked away. Others stared in fear, confusion, or disbelief. Some simply didn't want trouble. The boy felt it. That crushing disappointment when adults stand still as the world catches fire around you. Then his eyes found Caleb, even from across the room. Caleb's stillness felt different. It wasn't fear. It wasn't hesitation. It was something calmer, heavier, like a man who already knew what violence looked like and wasn't afraid of walking toward it again. The boy took one shaky step toward him, his chest heaving, their eyes locked, and Caleb saw everything he needed to see: terror, desperation, the kind of courage children shouldn't have to use. Caleb pushed his plate aside and rose to his feet. He walked toward the boy, slow enough not to scare him, steady enough to make the room breathe again. When he reached him, Caleb knelt, making himself smaller, safer. His voice was low and gentle. "Where is she?" "Son." The boy's lip quivered. He pointed a trembling finger out the window toward the old trailer park across the highway. Rust-stained metal boxes, sitting under the sun like forgotten tin cans. "Over there," he whispered. "My mom, her boyfriend. He's hurting her." He won't stop. A fresh tear slipped down his cheek. "I think he's gonna kill her." For a moment, the boy's words hung heavy in the stillness, pressing against everyone's chest. And yet, still, not a single man stepped forward. Caleb glanced around the bar, at all the grown adults pretending suddenly to be blind. He saw men twice his size refusing to leave their bar stools. Men who'd bragged about fights they'd been in, suddenly unable to stand. Men who had children of their own but couldn't meet this boy's eyes. Something old and familiar rose in Caleb's chest, not anger, but a quiet, hard resolve. He'd tried to leave this part of himself behind. He'd tried to live a life with no more rescues, no more violence, no more ghosts. But some things just won't let a man walk away. He put a steady hand on the boy's shoulder. "What's your name?" Caleb asked. "Evan," he whispered. "All right, Evan," Caleb said, rising to his full height. "You're not alone anymore." He didn't shout. He didn't puff his chest. He didn't look back to see if anyone followed. He simply made a choice. Caleb turned toward the door, his voice firm but quiet, carrying across the silent room, "No kid should beg alone." And with that, he opened the door, stepped into the blazing Arizona sun, and headed straight toward the danger waiting across the highway, because sometimes a child's cry is all it takes to awaken the protector in a man who thought he'd put his hero days behind him forever. Caleb stepped out of Miller's Roadhouse, with Evan close to his side. The boy practically jogging to keep up with a man whose stride had turned purposeful and unshakable. Heat shimmered above the asphalt as cars drifted lazily by. Unaware that a child's entire world was breaking apart just 100 yards from the road, Evan kept wiping his cheeks with the back of his hand, as if he didn't want Caleb to see how scared he was. His small breaths came fast. Too fast. Caleb slowed just enough for the boy to match him. His voice steady and grounding. "You're doing good, Evan. Just stay with me." Across the road. The trailer park sat hunched beneath the sun, rusting metal homes lined up like graves. Each one holding its own secrets. Most of them bad. But trailer number 7 didn't bother hiding anything today. It trembled, actually shook from the violence happening inside. A thud. A woman's cry. A man's muffled, furious roar. Evan flinched at the sound. His entire body tightening. His voice came out small. Cracked. Almost broken. "He'll kill her this time." Caleb rested a firm hand on the boy's shoulder. "Not today," he said. "Not while I'm here." They reached the narrow metal steps. Caleb sent Evan a look, quiet, commanding, protective, a look that told the boy to stay right where he was. Evan froze, hugging himself, tears pooling again. Caleb took the last 2 steps like they were nothing. Inside, another crash shook the trailer. Then Caleb planted his boot against the thin, dented door. One kick, the whole frame rattled. A second kick, the lock tore. The door swung inward with a crack that echoed through the small lot. What Caleb saw inside pulled the air from his lungs. Samantha Carter was crumpled on the stained linoleum floor, one hand up weakly, as if she still believed she could shield herself. Her cheek was split open. Her lip was bleeding. One eye was already swelling shut. Her ribs rose and fell in sharp, painful motions. Standing over her was Derek Holt Broad. Drunk. Red-faced. Belt gripped in his fist like a weapon he'd used too many times. His breathing was heavy and vicious. Like someone who didn't hate what he was doing, but enjoyed it. Derek spun around. Wild-eyed. Spit flying as he snarled. "Who the hell?" He didn't finish. He barely had time to take one aggressive step before Caleb moved. Years of training snapped into place, not loud. Not flashy. Just cold and efficient. Caleb caught Derek's arm mid-swing, twisted it down, kicked his legs out from under him, and slammed him chest first into the kitchen counter. The sound was sharp and final. Like something breaking, maybe pride. Maybe something deeper. Derek's belt clattered to the floor. "Get off me," he roared, thrashing like a wounded bull. But Caleb had handled worse than Derek in darker places than this. He pinned him easily. Voice low and calm. The kind of calm that terrifies violent men. "It's over." It wasn't a threat. It was a fact. Behind him, small footsteps pattered across the floor. "Mom," Evan's voice cracked through the tension as he rushed past Caleb and threw himself beside his mother. He wrapped his arms around her shoulders as gently as he could manage for a terrified 9-year-old. Samantha flinched at first, pain shooting through her body. But when she realized it was her son, she clutched him with what strength she had left. "Oh, sweetheart," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I didn't want you to see this." Evan buried his face in her neck, shaking uncontrollably. Caleb kept his grip on Derek as the man continued to fight, though each struggle grew sloppier, weaker. Like he finally understood he'd picked a battle with someone far more capable than he ever imagined. Outside, tires screeched in the gravel. A police vehicle, Deputy Mason Briggs, stepped inside mid-50s. Rugged. The kind of man whose life experience showed in the creases on his face. His eyes immediately landed on Caleb. Then on the scene around him. He didn't ask many questions. He didn't need to. "Caleb," he said with a nod. "Didn't expect to see you involved in something like this again." Caleb didn't look up. Didn't expect to be. But the kid came running. Mason stepped forward and snapped handcuffs onto Derek's wrist. "You're done." Holt. Derek spat a curse, struggling against both men as Mason hauled him upright. "She's mine. You can't take her from me. She lies. She..." Mason shoved him toward the door with zero sympathy. Save it. I've heard it all before. As the deputy dragged Derek outside, Samantha sagged against the wall, finally letting herself cry. Evan held her tighter, whispering that she was safe, that he found help. Caleb crouched beside them, checking her injuries with gentle eyes. Ambulance is on the way, he murmured. You're going to be okay. Samantha tried to wipe the tears off Evan's face, but her hand shook too much. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I didn't want you to live like this. You don't have to anymore, Caleb said quietly. She looked up at him, this stranger who walked into the worst moment of her life and stopped the nightmare. But then her expression changed. Fear replaced gratitude. She swallowed hard, voice breaking. He'll make bail. He always does. Her fingers tightened around her son. And when he gets out, he'll come for us. Caleb didn't flinch. Not even a little. The storm inside her trailer had ended, but the real danger, the kind that crawled back no matter how many times you shut the door, was only beginning. And Caleb knew what it meant when a woman said a man like Derek always came back. He knew. Because he had once been the boy who waited for footsteps just like Evan did. He straightened, jaw tightening. Let him try, Caleb said softly. He won't lay a hand on either of you again. And for the first time since she met him, Samantha believed him. The hospital room was dim, lit only by a small lamp near the bed where Samantha Carter lay propped against a stack of pillows. Her face was bruised, her ribs tightly wrapped beneath the thin gown, and her breaths came shallow, careful, like each inhale might hurt worse than the last. But physical pain wasn't what made her tremble. It was fear, real. Bone-deep fear that had lived inside her for months, maybe years. Evan slept curled beside her, his small hand still gripping the blanket near her hip, as if even in sleep he refused to let her out of his reach again. His face was blotchy from crying, his body slack with exhaustion, the kind that comes after running from danger with everything you have. Samantha watched him for a long time, brushing hair from his forehead with shaking fingers. Every couple of minutes, her eyes flicked toward the door, as though she expected it to burst open at any second. As though Derek Holt would simply walk in like he had every other time she tried to escape him. Caleb stood quietly at the foot of the bed, arms crossed, leaning against the wall. He had been there since the ambulance arrived, hardly saying anything. But his stillness was protective in a way Samantha couldn't explain. She didn't know him. He didn't owe her a thing. And yet, he hadn't left. Are you sure he's gone? She whispered, unable to stop her voice from quivering. Caleb didn't sugarcoat it. He's in custody. For now. She closed her eyes, pain flickering across her features. For now, she repeated, almost to herself. And that's when it came spilling out, not because she wanted to talk, but because fear makes the truth crawl out, whether you like it or not. He's done this for months, she said softly. He waits outside my work, my apartment, my son's school. Her throat tightened. I tried leaving him last spring, packed what little we had, and drove 3 towns over. I thought we were safe. Caleb stayed quiet, watching her with the kind of expression that made a person feel heard, even when he hadn't said a word. He found us in 2 days, she whispered. Smashed our new door in. Hurt me worse than tonight. Told me he'd always know where I was. She swallowed hard, eyes shining with a mixture of shame and terror. I left again in August. Stayed with a friend in Tucson. He showed up there too. Broke her window trying to get inside. She made us leave. Said she couldn't put her family at risk. Her voice cracked. I feel like he's everywhere. Like there's no place he can't find me. Caleb looked at Evan again, the way the boy clung to the blanket. The deep lines of fear still etched into his small face, even in sleep. Something old moved inside Caleb. Something he hadn't let himself feel in years. Because once, a long time ago, he had been the boy on the bed. Terrified of footsteps in the hallway. Terrified of the man who came home drunk. Terrified that nobody would help him or his mother either. He cleared his throat, pushing the memory back where it belonged. Derek won't touch you again, he said firmly. Samantha gave a weak, bitter smile that held zero belief. You don't know him. He always comes back. Caleb's jaw tightened. Then so will I. Before she could respond, his phone buzzed in his pocket. The screen flashed a name he didn't expect at this hour. Caleb stepped into the hallway to answer. Though the tension in his shoulders said he already knew what was coming. Caleb, Mason said without preamble. Holt made bail. Caleb closed his eyes, letting the news settle like a weight he had been expecting. How long ago? 20 minutes. And he's pissed. The sheriff exhaled loudly. His truck was last seen headed your direction. Thought you should know. Caleb's voice dropped an octave. You think he's coming for them? I'd bet my badge on it. Caleb hung up without a goodbye and walked back into the room. Samantha saw his face, and panic set in instantly. He's out. Isn't he? Caleb didn't soften the truth. Yes, her breathing hitched. Her hand tightened around Evan's. No, 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 no. He stepped closer, his presence steadying the room, the way an anchor steadies a ship in rough water. Listen to me, he said gently. He won't get near you, but he'll try. She whispered, then he'll fail. She looked at him, really looked, seeing the conviction carved deep into the lines of his face. This wasn't a man making empty promises. This was a man who knew exactly what violent men were capable of, and exactly how to stop them. There was no bravado in his voice, no showmanship, just certainty. Outside, a truck growled in the parking lot, its engine revving too long. Too loud a sound Samantha recognized immediately. Her pulse spiked. Caleb didn't even glance out the window. He didn't have to. He's out there. Isn't he? She whispered. Caleb's gaze stayed fixed on her, calm and resolute. Yes, but he won't get through me. And for the first time in years, despite the tremble in her hands and the terror pressing against her ribs, Samantha Carter believed someone might finally stand between her and the monster who'd been hunting her for far too long. Caleb stood at the edge of the hospital parking lot, his phone gripped tight in his hand. Derek Holt's truck had circled twice before roaring off into the night. But Caleb knew it wasn't over. Men like Derek didn't get scared. They got reckless. And tonight, recklessness meant danger for Samantha and Evan. For years, Caleb had lived alone, convincing himself that the world he once belonged to was behind him. He'd traded in the leather vest, the road miles, the Brotherhood. He had buried the part of himself that knew how to respond to violence with precision, but tonight had reminded him of an old truth. Some callings don't ask permission. They just come back. He scrolled through the contacts in his phone names he thought he'd never dial again. Men who had fought beside him on long stretches of asphalt and darker battlegrounds of life. One by one, he made the calls, and one by one, the men answered. By midnight, Caleb drove to an abandoned lot on the outskirts of town. The gravel crunched beneath his boots as he stepped into the warm desert air. A moment later, the night began to vibrate. One motorcycle, then another, then more. Headlights cut through the darkness as the old Brotherhood arrived. Men who ran garages, ranches, towing companies, and small repair shops all across the county. Men who had traded chaos for quiet lives, but still carried the Thunder Riders insignia in their hearts, even if not on their backs. 14 bikes rolled in, engines rumbling like a distant storm. The sound wasn't loud. It was heavy, a promise. From the front bike stepped Jonas Bear Maddox, 55 years old, big as a doorframe, beard streaked with gray. He had once been the one man Caleb feared disappointing. Bear took one look at Caleb and nodded. Heard the boy ran straight to you, he said. That still means something. Caleb exhaled. Derek Holt's coming after them, and Samantha won't make it through another night alone. Bear's eyes hardened, that old fire burning like a slow, dangerous spark. If a child runs to one of ours, he said, we respond. Silence followed the kind that always came right before action. 14 men ready to pick up a cause that wasn't technically theirs, simply because it was right. Simply because one scared kid believed they would. Caleb laid out the plan. They moved Samantha and Evan to a small roadside motel, 15 miles away, nothing fancy. Just a safe place with a manager who owed Bear a favor from a decade back. The room was tucked out of sight, far from the road, protected by a clear line of sight on all sides. The riders arranged rotating shifts, never fewer than 4 outside the room at a time. Each man treated the duty the way a soldier guards a forward post alert. Steady. Ready. Then there was the public warning. Bear and 2 others waited outside Samantha's old apartment the next afternoon, knowing Derek would show up eventually. And he did, stomping up the stairs with that trademark swagger fueled by bruised pride and too much alcohol. When he saw the 3 bikers standing there, arms crossed, eyes cold, he puffed up like a man ready to pick a fight he couldn't possibly win. Bear stepped forward just enough to make the point. "She's under protection now," he said. "Touch her again. You answer to all of us." Derek's jaw flexed, face twisting with rage. But even in his drunken bravado, some survival instinct kicked in. He stormed off. But his eyes burned with a promise of retaliation. That promise didn't take long. 2 nights later, just past 10 p.m., Derek showed up at the motel. His truck screeched into the lot, headlights snapping across the concrete. He stomped toward the room, shouting Samantha's name like it belonged to him. But when he rounded the corner, he froze. A wall of leather jackets and unblinking eyes stood waiting. 14 bikers. 14 reasons to rethink every decision he had made since waking up that morning. Derek's voice cracked mid-yell. Sweat broke out on his forehead. For the first time, he seemed to realize the difference between being a bully and being outnumbered by men who knew exactly how to handle violence. He backed up. Then backed up more. Got in his truck. And peeled out of the lot so fast, he almost took down a mailbox. Minutes later, Sheriff Mason Briggs arrived. Having been alerted by one of the bikers stationed near the road, he took in the scene, the angry tire marks, the riders standing shoulder to shoulder, and let out a slow breath. "Civic protection," he muttered. "Nothing illegal about guarding a scared woman." He turned to Bear with a wry smile. "You're lucky you got to him before I did." Bear grinned beneath his beard. "We'll take it from here, Sheriff." And Sheriff Briggs nodded, because he knew better than anyone that some justice was better delivered by men who lived by a code older than law books. 1 week later, peace finally settled over Samantha and Evan's lives, like a warm blanket after a long winter. With the help of community donations, people moved by the news story, by the boys' courage, by the bikers who refused to stand down. Samantha moved into a safe, clean apartment on the other side of town. The locks were strong, the neighbors were kind, and for the first time in months, she slept without waking in terror. Evan started school again, carrying his backpack with a pride that hadn't been there before. He ran onto the playground laughing, no longer checking over his shoulder, no longer shrinking at the sound of raised voices. Freedom looked good on him. A few days after the move, Samantha invited Caleb to the apartment. She didn't have much to offer, just a cup of coffee and gratitude that ran deeper than words. Evan hid behind her leg for a moment, then stepped forward, holding something carefully between both hands. A drawing, Grecian lines, bright and simple, showing Caleb standing beside a small boy, both of them in front of a shining motorcycle. Above them, in uneven handwriting, were 4 words, "Real heroes still exist." Caleb stared at the drawing longer than either of them expected. The tough man who rarely let emotion break through felt his voice hitch as he swallowed hard. "He's right. You know," Samantha whispered. "You saved us." Caleb shook his head, eyes softening as he looked down at Evan. "Your boy saved you," he said quietly. "He ran for help when it mattered. That's bravery." The boy smiled, small, shy, but genuine. And in that simple moment, the world felt right again, because sometimes the bravest cry for help comes from the smallest voice. And sometimes, the people we least expect become the heroes we need. If you believe in standing up for the vulnerable, hit like and subscribe. Tell us in the comments, would you have stood up like Caleb did?